Welcome back to another Wanna Know Pod. I'm Seth Engle,
I'm Zach Allen.
and we are back. I mean, we have some good news to kind of discuss. I see Zach is still wearing his Celtics hat despite the rough Game 7 loss. How are you feeling, Zach?
That kind of caused a piece of me inside to just fall apart. But, I'm a Celtics fan for life.
I guess your basketball's in the rearview mirror now. It's full eyes ahead on football, despite us having a couple more months. Um, I just got back from Colorado. It was an awesome trip. I'm happy to be back though. Um, Saw the Rocky Mountains, which was crazy. Yesterday, Penn State released 4 new kickoff times. Um, so I mean, most of it is pretty standard. It's like they're like small games, but then there was a little tidbit. I mean, I'll just go through the list of the games that were announced. Um, so they had Delaware yesterday, which is a 3:30 kick, which is like okay. Illinois is going to be big noon on Fox, and UMass is 3:30 to be determined later. Michigan, as was reported before, is going to be a big noon. And then Iowa has been moved from 8 p.m. to 7:30 on CBS. The one big thing to kind of take away from here, because I had people in my comment section was like, is this even newsworthy? Like, these are small games. Like, I don't care. It's like, well, you should care because a lot of people are going to have trouble watching that Delaware game, which is going to be streamed exclusively on Peacock, um, which seems to
Yeah.
be, kind of the way that, I don't know, sports could be going pretty soon. It's like this exclusive streaming for games. We've seen it before in some other sports. I know that the NFL and NBC reached a deal to, exclusively stream some playoff games on Peacock this upcoming season. But that's kind of where we are right now. I don't know, like, do you have, any takes on that? I know a lot of people are,
Yeah,
pretty.
and I think this whole thing, really started to start when the NFL put Thursday night games on Amazon Prime. Um, Luckily, I already had Amazon Prime, so it didn't affect me too much. But I do not have Peacock, and I feel like it's not up there with like YouTube TV, Amazon Prime yet. I think it's definitely one of the growing networks, but I think just for a fan, trying to watch a game, yes, it's, you know, Delaware, it's an FCS opponent, it's not anything huge, but it's definitely a little bit of a hurdle for fans to watch the game. And if they don't have a Peacock account, they'll have to either, I don't know if they offer free trials or something, but they'll have to go through that, sign up for a free trial, cancel it, maybe forget about it, and then get a bill. But I think the streaming services are where this sport is going. I don't think it's just ESPN, ABC, NBC anymore. I wouldn't be surprised in the future if it's just like YouTube TV exclusives. I feel like it's just continuing to become more uh the wealth is being spread more around more than just cable networks. And for those networks, it's a great thing. I know Peacock is going to definitely benefit from Penn State's fan base, Michigan State's fan base. I think Michigan was the other one. But for fans, it's definitely more of a difficult task to watch their favorite teams.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think this is where the world of sport is going, unfortunately. I'm throwing it out there. If you want to watch these Peacock exclusive games, which are going to be, it'll be 9 exclusive Peacock games across the country this year. Um, it's $5 a month. I mean, it's not a ton, but it's like, I mean, you already have cable. I completely understand, but what it'll be interesting to me is as we kind of see this media rights deal unfold over the next 7 years, which is how long the deal is, 7 years, 7 billion. Um, what exactly is this going to look like for these networks? I think NBC is being a little more aggressive than some of the other networks, where they're offering this kind of alternative platform for you to watch games on, where it's most of the time it's NBC and Peacock. But then for those exclusive games, it's kind of like, hey, we also have this new thing called Peacock coming around, which could be the next big thing. I think it's a little tidbit to what we're going to see after this media rights deal expires. I think whenever money is brought up in a conversation of college football, which it is a lot right now, I think that really scares people because it takes away from that kind of innocence of sport that we've grown up loving. Like, this is something that we watch sports because we love it, and it's a break from the hectic nature of daily life. We're able to sit back and watch a football game, and that makes people happy. So when it has the opportunity to burden someone's pockets or make it difficult for someone to watch a game, it's
Yeah.
tricky. Penn State is looking good. Like, it's a good team. I think most people around the country are projecting them to be, a 10-2 regular season team at this point, with the potential to maybe beat Ohio State or Michigan this year. We'll see about that. But a big help to them, I think, is going to be this group of transfers that just came in, which we haven't really discussed before, came in about the middle of May. And there's some big names here. Headlined by Dante Cephas, the coveted Kent State wide receiver transfer. He's now on campus. Trey Potts, he's a Pennsylvania native, played good minutes behind Mo Ibrahim at Minnesota. Davion Collins, who played sparingly at Mississippi State as a freshman cornerback. Alonzo Ford, who was a star DT at Old Dominion last year. And then Addison Penn, an O lineman from Duke who didn't play much with the Blue Devils, but he's depth. So let's go down the line here. I want to break these guys down, especially Cephas. Let's start with him, because he's entering a Penn State wide receiver room that was in need of a true third guy behind KLS and Trey Wallace. So what do you think Penn State's really getting in Cephas here?
Yeah, I remember talking about him when he originally decided to commit, and here we are months later, and he's finally on campus. But I think the thing that stands out is his ability to stretch the field. I mean, he averaged, I think, like 15 yards per catch in his final 2 seasons at Kent State, and he has experience. He's fast. He's essentially, he could be a game changer. And you know, I don't think we saw, despite the Rose Bowl, Penn State go deep too often. But he gives out wide toward the sidelines, just a true deep threat. When you combine him with like Trey Wallace, who apparently has like exceptional jumping capabilities, and Keandre Lambert-Smith, who's kind of the leader of the group now, I think he adds just a different level that Drew Aller can throw to, and maybe take some of the pressure off the tight ends that we saw Penn State go to a lot last year.
Yeah. My two biggest question marks with this Penn State team this year is, number one, is Drew Aller ready to be a starting quarterback? And I think a lot of people are optimistic, but we don't, really know, because we just haven't seen him play those real minutes yet. My second biggest question mark is whether Keandre Lambert-Smith is good enough to be a true number one. And that was a question that we had all throughout the spring, where James Franklin's talking about, Keandre, and saying like, there's more to being a number one receiver than just what you do on the field. Because he kind of got to tie the whole room together, be a true leader. And I think Penn State had that with Jahan Dotson. I think they had a little bit with Parker, KJ Hamler for sure. Is Keandre ready to be that guy? And I think that Dante Cephas coming in loosens the burden a little bit. This is a guy that can play football. Like, we know that. He had over 1,900 receiving yards over the past 2 seasons. He went to high school with Tank Smith and Daquan Hardy. So he has connections to the team. I think he really comes in there and it's a good fit all around. This is a room that needs him. And I think it just adds star power to a wide receiver room that was
Yeah,
questionable. Like,
I mean,
quite honestly, it's a questionable room.
it's fitting you brought up Tank Smith in some way. I
I
enjoyed
had to,
that.
you know how I am.
Yeah, but I mean, I think going into the season, the defense everyone knows is just they have so much returning star power. But even last year, I don't think the wide receiver room was necessarily game changing in any way. Parker, was hurt at the end of the season. Um, Mitchell Tinsley had a good year. But it was a lot of throwing to the tight ends. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Parker Washington led in receiving yards, even though he played like 3 or 4 less games, and no one broke 700 receiving yards. So I think when you look at the other teams, like, Ohio State's kind of an outlier. They just have an unbelievably stacked wide receiver room. But I don't know, since it's kind of been since Jahan Dotson got drafted to 1 year, they haven't really had a 1,000-yard guy, and it's interesting to see what this year will bring, or if it'll be multiple like 800-yard guys or 700-yard guys, or if it's just going to be the same but with a more experienced group.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Keandre to me, and I'm gonna bring his name up a lot here, is because I think he was kind of just thrown into that number one role right after Parker left. It was everyone just looked towards Keandre Lambert-Smith, and they're like, "Oh, you're the guy now. Like, you went off in the Rose Bowl. Like, you were pretty good in that Michigan State game. So now it's your time." But I feel like a lot of people are forgetting the fact that, like, he did not play like a number one receiver at all through last year. Like, he wasn't that great. I mean, there were certain times where he stood out, but I mean, you look at his stats too. And this is back to back to back weeks. Indiana, 1 receiving yard for 9 yards. Maryland, 1 receiving yard for 2 yards. Rutgers, 3 receptions for 9 yards. Like, there wasn't too much consistency there, and I think that Utah game really boosted his stats, and kind of made everyone think like, okay, well, this is the guy. And I think he's talented, and I think he has the ability to get somewhere near 1,000 yards, maybe, depending on his relationship with Drew. But I don't know. It's still just it's a major question mark to me that I think we.
Yeah, I mean, and his whole college career so far, he's been the number 3 guy. So
Yeah.
I think he did just assume that role, and James Franklin expects him to be in that role, and I'm sure he's this off season fitting into that role. So we'll see how he does. I mean, after the Rose Bowl, I know he said something like, I knew what I could do. You guys are just seeing it now, or something like that. So I think this season is really the season for him to show everybody what he can do.
Yeah, I agree. He's got confidence on his side. He's got that for sure. And I like Keandre. I think he's good. But Cephas adds some insurance. Say that.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Insurance. I want to go down the line here. The next guy I think makes the biggest impact out of these transfers is Alonzo Ford from Old Dominion. When we talked to James in the spring, he talked about one wide receiver who's going to be that number 3. And the second question mark was really that depth at defensive end, or at defensive tackle. We know Devon Ellies and Hakeem Beamon are probably going to start. I think that's pretty sure. But then behind them, I mean, there's not a whole lot of star power, at least compared to last year when you were able to plug Ellies off the bench behind Mustafa. So I think Ford's gonna slip in there next to like Zane Durant, and then you got guys like Jordan Vandenberg, and Keziah Zard is gonna be right there too. I think he's great for depth. I mean, this guy was fantastic at Old Dominion last year. He had 32 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 3.5 sacks as an interior D lineman. Those are great numbers.
Yeah, and especially after the Michigan game last year, I feel like depth and just physicality in the trenches has been really just a talking point for James Franklin, and I think that's part of the reason why they went out and got him. And this is going to be his 3rd year at college football, but he was a Sun Belt honorable mention last season, and now transfer into an already deep room without maybe a PJ Mustipher clear cut number 1 guy. I think he just adds to the mix, and I feel like that position might be a little bit of what we saw at running back last year, where if a guy gets hot, or in this case does particularly well holding the line, he might get more reps throughout the season. So we'll see how that shakes out, but like you said, he definitely adds to 3.5 sacks at defensive tackle is a great number, and we'll see if it transfers against Big Ten opponents.
Yeah, there's a guy that I kind of want to bring up in that D tackle room. Devon Townley's a guy I'm looking forward to seeing. He made the full switch back to DT from defensive end after entering the transfer portal and then returning. He's a guy that I heard was doing well over the spring, and I think can add some much needed depth there along with Ford.
I mean, Townley's like 6'6", so if
he's massive.
Starts beefing up, like there's James Franklin's size fixed in that defensive tackle.
The thing that is weird to me, and you bring up the size, is that Franklin made this whole big deal about it at Michigan, as we were talking about before, but it's not like they're bringing in guys that are necessarily the biggest.
No, I mean,
he's like talking about like, oh, everyone thinks they're Aaron Donald and they're not. And then he just goes out and he gets, I don't understand the philosophy, but like he goes out and he gets a guy that is the same size as Aaron Donald. Like Alonzo Ford is 6'3", 275. Like that's not a guy who's necessarily going to beat you with size in the trenches. He'll beat you with skill, but I don't know. That's just me. And you look through this whole room, and it's a bunch of guys who are undersized tackles. Hakeem Beeman is built like a defensive end, plays on the interior. Zane Durant is like the same exact size as Aaron Donald completely. Alonzo Ford, I just said.
Yeah,
I mean, it's Jordan Vandenberg, not big.
I know when we talked to Zane this offseason, he's like, no, I got better at getting off the ball quicker. And, Hakeem Beeman's thing that he had going for him was explosiveness off the ball. And it's never just like, I'm a bruiser in the trenches. And I think Zane did talk about, kind of working on being physical and, getting dirty in the trenches a little bit. So we'll see how that shakes out. But yeah, I was just thinking about when I looked at, Alonzo Ford's size, he's, like you said, he's not even 300 pounds. So, I mean, we'll see if he beefs up. I know some of Penn State's players have put on some good weight, as James Franklin says this offseason. So we'll see if he's any exception.
Yeah. I mean, that's another question mark, though. Like, lacking that size that PJ Mustipher, he's just a rock. He's not necessarily going to show up in the stat sheet, but like, he's big and he impacts, both the rush and the pass. Like, quite honestly,
I feel like as we talk about this, it's a lot of we'll see. Like,
yeah, which is
it's not
June,
like
June is the month of saying we'll see.
Exactly. We won't know until West Virginia.
Yeah.
We won't know until West Virginia.
Wrapping up with the rest of those transfers, Trey Potts, he, played good minutes at Minnesota. He's that true vet in the running back room that they really lacked last year, honestly, after Devin Ford left, and I don't even know where Kevon Lee was for most of the year. Now he's gone. So Penn State was really just suiting up two freshmen as their only scholarship running backs for like the whole year.
And
So now
I mean,
Trey Potts,
it did work for them, but
it did work,
you
but
had experience with Trey Potts in the mix, and it's like a whole new thing.
yeah, and I don't want to like speak this into existence, but like like injuries happen. And I'm not saying that Nick Singleton or Katron Allen's going to get hurt, but like what happens if one of them did get hurt last year? Like they're kind of screwed. And then if you
It
look at
just
this year, if they didn't bring in Trey Potts, like who's behind them? Some more freshmen, like London Montgomery coming off a torn ACL. Bring Tank Smith back up. Like, I don't know. I would have
yeah,
loved to
I
see.
mean,
I mean, Tank Smith got good touches last year, but that was also partially because they were
yeah, Penn State
destroying
was
everyone. And then the other guys too. Davion Collins, he comes in to fill that. I mean, he's not Storm Duck. Let's just get that across. He's Storm Duck was all ACC. Davion Collins is a freshman with a boatload of eligibility remaining, who has potential. He fills a spot in that cornerback room that was left by Duck. And then Addison Penn, I wouldn't expect to see him a ton in games. He
no,
has experience, but I mean, when I look at that addition, it's more so like let's do the same thing with the offensive line that we did last year, where we just stockpiled the room with all this depth so that if people do go down as they did last season, they have relatively comfortable options to back them
yeah,
up.
yeah, and I mean, essentially, Penn State and Mississippi State just traded because same day, I believe Collins came in, Kevon Lee announced he's transferring to the Bulldogs.
Yeah.
But I think you brought up a great point at the end. Last summer was basically a catastrophe from a depth perspective at offensive line. I mean, he was saying James Franklin was telling us that people were playing double reps a lot of the time.
Remember the blue white game? They
Yeah,
couldn't play the traditional game because they didn't have enough O linemen.
yeah, and I mean it's great for those who could play and get extra work. But as a team, you don't want that to happen. Um, and he only played like 16 snaps last season, so it's not a ton of experience. But with guys like Olu and you know all these experienced guys on the roster and Coach Trotline, I, I think there's going to be some development there too.
Right. And then to wrap things up, it'd be wrong not to discuss at least a little bit recruiting because this is just a major month of recruiting. July is too. June is that big official visit month, and then July they continue a little bit, but July's really when you start to see, all these commitments. It happens every year. But this weekend's big for Penn State. They have 12 guys coming up. Just this weekend alone. Liam Andrews is a guy, he's from Massachusetts, and he's an O lineman. Penn State's recruited really well at O line, so he'll be here this weekend. He's a top 100 guy. Chris Cole, a linebacker from Virginia, is one of the top players in Virginia. Penn State has recruited phenomenally in Virginia over the past 2 years. Let's see if they can keep that going with the official visit. Jalen Harvey is a guy to look for. He's been heavily tied to Penn State for, I want to say at least a year or two now. He attends Quincy Orchard, which is where Chop Robinson went. He's also a defensive end. Could make for a good fit. Kari Jackson is already committed. He's a linebacker. He'll be coming up this weekend and will not be up next weekend, which is when the entirety of the 2024 class will be up, which is next weekend. So that's a little bit. I mean, there are other names obviously that are coming up. Chance Robinson's another big name. He's a Miami
Marsh,
receiver.
Nick
He,
Marsh, receiver.
yeah.
But
He attends St. Thomas Aquinas, which is where King Mac went. So high school teammate. Penn State has ties to that high school. And Conrad Hussey also went there, but he obviously decommitted. So those are just a little bit of, what to expect for this week. We'll hop on the pod next week and talk more about, next week's visits, which is, an even bigger week. And that'll be jam-packed with 21 guys coming next week. So
yeah, I mean the month of June is like close to 50 guys visiting. So
yeah. So recruiting season's heating up. But we're still out here discussing Peacock and streaming services. So there's a lot going on. We're making the most of it. But summer's in full form, dude.
yep, it's closing in on the 2023 season.
Yeah.
One season to go.
Sure. All right. Well, that's it for the Want to Know Pod. I'm Seth. This is Zach. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Want to Know Pod and look up our website. It's psucollegian.com. So don't go to collegian.psu.edu. Go to psucollegian.com for all your Penn State football news from me and Zach.
Yeah, great catch at the end there.
Yeah, I had to. All right. Take care.
Peace.